Coming up on Chasing the Natty, we gave the game plan to set yourself up for CFF Dynasty last week. Now we're going to take the next step and talk about trading in CFF. We'll be covering trading mindsets in all sorts of type of different leagues, and then we'll provide you with examples for each that we'll discuss and debate which side won. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trey Von Henderson! As advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. We will continue the Dynasty talk as we have been doing for the last 1 week, but we're gonna keep it going this week. Last week, like I said in the intro, we kind of gave you guys the game plan. This week, we're going to start talking a bit more about trades. Like, that's kind of that next step. You're wanting to look for people or ways to fix up those holes in your roster. You have to start with the trading. But to bring it in, we're going to continue on with our guest from last week. Please, everybody, welcome back in Mr. Brandon T. Sanders. Brandon, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing well, Jared. Thanks for having me back on. Continuing the Dynasty franchise talk and being better managers and commissioners as we move forward into the 22 season. So I'm happy to be on, man. I'm
happy to have you back on again, Brandon. You're always a blast to have back on here. Before we get started and everything, we're just going to go ahead and get the housekeeping out of the way, y'all. If you're watching this show on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button right down there. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you leave a comment right down there, guys. I love talking to y'all. Please give me something. Let me talk to you guys. I want to hear your thoughts. It is incredible stuff to hear from you guys. I love when you guys DM me on Twitter, which, by the way, you can find me there. I'm at CFF_Jared. If you want to find Brandon, he is at CFF University. I believe that is your tag now, right, Brandon?
It is the tag.
It is the tag. So Brandon's at CFF University. You can always talk to him as well. Great guy to talk to. In addition, if you're listening to this on a podcast, make sure you're following us wherever you are listening to this, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify and Apple Podcasts allow you to leave those reviews. So make sure you leave those 5-star reviews. Those are always helpful, and I love reading those reviews there. With that being said, I think that pretty much covers everything for this show. But just a reminder to everybody, we are a part of the Campus Canton podcast and show family, in which case, obviously, we are the CFF show, but we are just one show out of a whole week long just lineup of shows that you guys can listen to throughout the week that'll constantly keep you up to date in any type of fantasy league that you are playing in revolving around college players. Obviously, on Mondays, you have us, Chasing the Natty, with myself, Jared Palmgren, and the rest of the CFF team here at Campus Again, whether that be Brandon, whether that be Nate Marquise, whether that be Chris Moxley, and any other guests that I bring on. We are here for your CFF needs. On Tuesdays, you got Campus Live with Austin Nace and Colin Decker. That is a podcast-only show, so you'll find that on the podcast feed, not on the YouTube feed. But obviously, you guys have been listening to them for a long time. They're covering everything college side of your Campus Canton leagues there. They'll let you know which prospects to be looking out for. In addition, Wednesdays, you got Devi Debates, which is live streamed on YouTube at night. That is with Felix Sharp, Mac Bruning, Austin Nace, and Chris Moxley. They're a ton of fun. They will debate all things Devi there, as the title of the show would indicate, Devi Debates. And again, they're just a great time. Go hang out with them on Wednesday nights with the live stream. I'm usually there in the chat. If I'm not messing with them on Slack, I'll mess with them there in the chat. In addition, on Thursdays, Canton Bound with Austin Nace and Colin Decker, the NFL side of the Campus Canton podcast. In addition, a new YouTube-only show is now premiering on Thursdays as well. That is The Official with Alfred Fernandez, Matt Powell, and David Nipple on YouTube. They will be covering recruiting through an analytics lens. So they're not entirely too fantasy side with it, but they're going to help you how to identify guys coming out of high school and their NFL potential immediately. Rather than waiting to see what they did in college, they want to see what traits they can find in high school that then translate to the NFL. And then finally on Fridays, you have Mr. Brandon T. Sanders with his new podcast for CFF Dynasty, as well as just Campus to Canton if you want to use it for that as well. The Future Freshman Podcast. He will be covering all sorts of guys coming out of high school, as well as how their fantasy or how they will translate to a fantasy lens in college, and then hopefully maybe to the NFL, but he's mostly going to focus on those college stats. Finally, we got a couple of everyday shows coming out right now. On YouTube, you can find College Football Filtered with Chris Moxley. He'll just be doing quick, short, little 20-minute video, 15, 20-minute videos on just the latest news for college football. And then also on the podcast feed, you got the Daily Draft Report with Dwight Peebles. He is going over pretty much as many prospects for the NFL draft before the draft actually gets here. He's doing guys on the offensive and defensive side of the ball there. So if you just want to be up to date on all the draft prospects, go listen to that as well. Brandon, I'm going long-winded here. Is there anything else you want to add to all of this before we really get started here?
I just want to say I enjoyed this lineup. You can find most of this actually on the Apple stream that they have over through Apple Podcasts. I believe they might be on a few other spaces as well. My favorite is when after the Debbie debate, they actually record the after show. And my favorite is having Nate on, because Nate always goes and is like, you got this player wrong, or he'll tell him like your stats were wrong on this one and correct, just like Nate likes to do in the Slack channel for us as well. So shout out to Nate Marquise. He's our guy, and he sets it straight when it comes to the actual information as well. So that was really funny. But I enjoy all these guys. I love the daily stuff. Just, keep a lookout. We are going to go in video form, so that'll be available on YouTube, as well as we'll find us. Right now we're on Spotify and Anchor. We are going to have Apple here pretty soon, and so a couple of the other, platforms for the Future Freshman Podcast. So just be listening out. So far we got 5 stars and on Spotify. So thank you for whoever have done that. I appreciate you guys. And just keep it up, because, the ratings help on both sides of the coin and actually gets us seen. So people will be like, hey, what is this podcast? And they'll click on it and give it a listen. And that just gives us more love at the C2C site. And that just gets the word out. And that's what we want. So appreciate it. And I love the lineup, and I'm excited to see it expand here in the future.
Again, that's the crazy thing, is that we got even more content coming y'all's way, and like you're not even going to be able to know like what to do with all of it. It's going to be crazy stuff for you guys. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and really get into just trading in general for CFF. We're going to break this down between different types of leagues today. So we're going to start off with CFF Redraft. We'll then move into CFF Keepers. We'll talk about how it works in CFF Dynasty. And then we're going to throw a little bit of Campus to Canton in there, because I know a lot of you guys out there do listen, are big Campus to Canton players, but you just want to listen to us because you want to know which college players to look for and everything. That's fine. Want to give you guys a little something because you guys have been great listeners. But one thing I did want to touch on was just kind of 3 overall rules for trading that I personally have, and I think everybody should kind of keep in mind when they're doing it. Some of it's a bit more abstract, some of it's just like a more technical, but the first one here, and I don't have a graphic for this, we're going to run through this relatively quickly, but first one to me, that's the most important thing, is just remember the human. Remember that when you're trading with somebody, you're talking to another person. You're not like arguing with some computer, some faceless algorithm that you're looking at. You're talking to a person. So you got to remember that if they don't see the trade the same way as you do not call them an idiot. Be nice. Like, again, like this seems like simple stuff, but I've heard so many horror stories from different people in different leagues talking about how like somebody berated them because they clearly didn't see the value within a trade. Brandon, is there anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, just when you're, this is your league mates. These could be like friends for a long time. These could be new friends that you're making and stuff like that. Just be a decent human being, like Jared's saying. Like, understand that everyone has different values and opinions. Also, he'll talk about that, but everyone has different team needs, but kind of look at it at both perspective, not just what you got to have or what you're focusing on. Remember, this is a dance. This is truly, negotiation is a dance. It takes 2 to tango. So make sure that you are tangoing correctly, and don't ruin a reputation or a league or make anything of a negative note. Just just nice and steady. Just keep it chill.
No, I definitely could not agree more. And the other thing, the first one, remember the human, really kind of just goes straight into the second one for me, and that is, don't tell someone else what their team needs. Everybody runs their team differently. Just because you look at their roster and think, I think that they really need to upgrade their wide receiver room, or they have too many QBs, they totally can just get rid of one of them. Everybody runs their team differently, and I could tell you there's no faster way to shut down a trade than to directly tell somebody like, oh, your team's going to definitely benefit from this because of this, this, and this. Don't tell somebody else. Let the trade speak for itself. Now, if they directly ask you and say like, okay, how do you think this benefits my team? Then you can offer that information, but do not start out with that kind of information. That is a very good, like I said, very good way to just shut somebody down and make you think that you're trying to sell them something rather than you trying to benefit both sides. Anything else you want to add here, Brandon?
Yeah, just keep it lighthearted. Like I said, don't go directly and like, hey, your team sucks, or you don't have this many wide receivers or this many tight ends. That stuff shouldn't be a direct thing. Honestly, I either approach usually in joking manner. Usually I either make fun of myself or, whatever, or I'll just, talk about things like, ask the person, especially if you know them. So it's like, hey, how are you actually doing? There's different ways. This isn't just all strategy. This is also, like we talked about, be human. These are your league mates. So for me, it's like, I usually sometimes will wait to see if someone will reach out first, or they may put it in the league chat. They're looking to make a move. And that's usually when I slide in DMs and we, get the negotiations going. You'll see one of those trades coming up here in the show where it just happened kind of naturally because we both were seeking out something for our particular teams. But that person that I traded with decided that they needed to get a better wide receiver, and I needed a running back. So that worked out really good. The other one was, just, striking up conversation. I was looking to get my boy Drake May, and I got him. But at the same time, like, I didn't necessarily, and that's the thing, like, trades, it doesn't have to be so equal. Like, if you're after what you're after, it's okay to maybe give up just a tad more to get the guy that you're after and stuff like that. So that's something to also say, is that, don't go pointing out, people's, flaws or whatever in their team or something like that. Just bad etiquette, be honest, but at the same time, like, just like, hey man, how's things going? This is what I'm looking to do for my team particular. And then that usually opens up the conversation. So even if you start with yourself, just don't start the process like, hey, your team needs this. That's usually not good etiquette. So
I definitely would agree. And like I said it earlier, I'll just repeat it again here. Just let the trade speak for itself. If somebody's going to look at it, they're going to be like, that seems like something I wouldn't want. They're going to reject it. Sometimes you're going to get rejected. It happens, y'all. Like, it's perfectly fine. It's nothing on the character of the person that rejected you. Just know they didn't see the trade the same way that you saw it, and you just move on, see if you can talk to somebody else, or see if you can offer something else up. Again, negotiations, a back and forth thing. Third, this one's less etiquette and more of just like tactical and everything. Just remember, utilize all possible tradable items. That can include players. That can include draft picks. But a lot of people tend to forget things like fab money. If you are in a league where you have fab, like trade, like use that. Like, see if you can, like, if a trade's like really close, but you can't quite find somewhere in the middle, like, throw some fab money in there maybe. See if that works out. Or if you are in a league where you have like a supplemental draft and a freshman draft, like, make sure you utilize both of those kind of draft picks in that. Again, that to me is the other thing, is that people tend to kind of get fixated on just draft picks and just players sometimes, or that's all they're kind of thinking about. But like, again, look around your league, know your league. I'm going to say that so many times today. Know your league and know what can be traded between different people. Because once you do that, then a lot more options open up to you. Anything else you want to add here, Brandon?
Same thing. Like, remember that you have these assets. You have more than just player for player. So like I said, like Jared was talking about, know who you're trading, they might have a particular college team they like, and they might want a certain one. I'm a Carolina guy, so people know where the home advantage is at. So if they're wanting to trade away a Carolina player, they know who to come talk to, right? So it's like, all right, like I might value them a little bit more than some of the others, or maybe you have an Ohio State guy and they just want, every single one of the wide receivers, that just understand your league mates, understand the league, understand the rules, and understand that you have countless amount of utilities that you can use to make that happen. And like Jared said, if it's just teetering, like, hey, what do you think about taking, like, I don't know, 5% of my FAB budget or something like that? And for those that don't know, FAB means free agent acquisition budget. It's just it's out there. Not right now, but I'll explain it now for you. So
appreciate it.
Basically, it's for your waiver wire if you use a bidding system, which I find to be the fairest. So if you don't have FAB, I would talk to your step one, like we talked about last week, talk to your commissioner and see if maybe you guys would change FAB versus waiver priority. It's just like a game within a game, and that's the best part. Is like you don't know if you outbid someone or not until waivers hit that day. So like I said, game within a game, so it's even better. But use some of that. Use your freshman draft picks or your supplemental ones, or both of them the same one. You'll see some examples here. We'll kind of continue, but just remember that.
Absolutely. Again, those are the three kind of main rules and everything. Like, remember the human. Remember these are people you're talking to. Don't tell somebody else what their team needs. Again, let the trade speak for itself. And then remember to utilize as many options as you have. Like, again, don't get fixated on one thing. Sometimes you'll have a deal that's only players. Sometimes you'll have a deal that has only trade or only picks. Sometimes you will have a mix of all different kind of things. Personally, I kind of love trades like that, like where you kind of really like pull out the nuances of like, alrighty, if I like, let's make this as equal as possible. It's like you have like, all right, you're going to give me 2 picks and a player. I'm going to give you 1 pick and a player, but I'm also going to give you 5% of my FAB budget. Again, example and everything, but it's just fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I also like I love the art of the counter proposal. So it's like just because you don't take the exact first one, I mean, you could talk about all of it, in direct messages or league chat or whatever that you choose to do. But sometimes it's like, all right, this is what I'm feeling. Okay, me too. Send what you think is fair, and then I'll I'll rebuttal with something, and then that's usually the art of the trade. Is like, you don't have to say yes on the first offer. It is okay to counter offer, guys. It's okay.
I will agree with you 100%. I'm going to add one caveat in here, though. If you're going to offer a counter proposal, this is just kind of a pet peeve of mine. Don't completely change the deal.
Right.
Like, if somebody offers you, like, I don't know, let's say they're offering you like CJ Stroud and Bijan Robinson, and you're countering, and they want to get Travion Henderson and Quinn Ewers. Like, don't then counter propose with, oh, but I want Malik Cunningham and Rasheen Ali. I want Malik Cunningham and Rasheen Ali for, I don't know, like, again, these are like absurd names I'm talking here, but like,
right.
Like, I want Malik Cunningham and Rasheen Ali, and I'll give you, like, I don't know, Deuce Vaughn and Caleb Williams or something like that. Like, don't change the names. Like, try to keep it relatively the same. Like, you change like one running back, or like shift the round of the pick just a little bit or something like that, or stuff like that. Again, to me, it's not helpful to just completely change the deal in the counter proposal. That's almost a different trade talk at that point.
Yeah.
Like, if that I hope I make sense with that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you're looking to just adjust. You're not looking to just completely blindside people. So that makes a whole lot of sense.
Alrighty. So with that, we talked about that long enough. Good God, we're already 20 minutes in. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and talk about CFF Redraft. This is probably going to be the one we spend the least amount of time on today, because if you play in CFF Redraft, you know that trading isn't a huge part of the redraft process. More often than not, you're focused on the draft, you're focused on waiver wires, stuff like that. But trading is an option, so let's talk about it a little bit here. To me, I am not as huge of an advocate of having an early trade deadline in a lot of leagues. I will say it for redraft, mostly because it is very, very easy for, in those later weeks after, like, you would normally have a trade off where you have teams that are just completely out of it. it's so easy for them to just be like, whatever, I'll just trade it away to somebody, and they get nothing in return. Like, again, in a dynasty, at least you're looking to get some high picks, maybe trade away some of your seniors and stuff like that. To me, that makes sense. That's why I'm personally okay with tanking for the most part. Like, no obvious. Like, we'll discuss that more when we get to dynasty and everything. But like, to me, a trade deadline is almost a must in redraft leagues. And then the other part of redraft is, we talked about earlier, where it's like you can have a mix of draft picks, you can have a mix of draft picks, you can have a mix of players, you can have a mix of Fab Money. You don't get that in redraft, because really all you have to work with is your players. Now you can play around with that a little bit and be like, all right, I want one big player, like a top player, and I'll give you like 2 or 3 depth pieces that you can work with, stuff like that. But to me, your options are more limited in CFF Redraft. Brandon, is there anything else you want to kind of add here?
Just to elaborate, a lot of us play in NFL fantasy as well. And I did have actually he's one of my best friends, and he was in the league, and it didn't go his way. So he literally tried to drop all of his good players for then the waiver wire to go completely crazy, or he tried to trade there as well. So it's important. Like, it's different because the NFL has an NFL actual trade deadline in real life. So a lot of people use that. You don't have that in college, but you don't need to be trading when you're in the championships in week 11 and 12, right? So it's like have a deadline. And also, if there's a way to make it undroppable, or just a common rule, don't drop your good players if you're in redraft with like week 10, when people are trying to, because then everyone's just going to throw all their fab or all their waiver wire priority right there. Because let's face it, in redraft, it's about how you draft, and it's also about the waiver wire. Waiver wire is everything in redraft as well. So it's like, if you disrupt that by just dropping all these good players, say if you drop Ali, and now you have one of the top running backs wide open in waiver wire, that's just going to just make things really, really awkward. And it's just not going to be fair for the person that gets it, especially if they are a championship caliber team already that year. So
I definitely agree, and I am thankful that I've never actually run into a situation like that. Normally, if somebody is like that down in the dumps with their team, they're not paying attention enough to where they're like thinking about something like that.
Yeah, me and my best friend had to have a good heart-to-heart. I was like, bro, if you're going to stay in this league, that's not happening anymore. So he hasn't done it since. So we came to a great understanding.
Again, to me, that's more etiquette, because like trade deadlines, you can set a trade deadline. You can't set a period of time where you can no longer drop players in a redraft, because that affects everybody, obviously.
Yep.
So, and you don't ever want to like have a cutoff to where it's like, oh, well, if you've lost this many times, you're basically just done with this league. You might as well run an eliminator at that point. Which eliminators are fun. But there's no best ball. Yeah. But yeah, in best ball, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, again, not too much to talk about with CFF Redraft in terms of trading. To me, again, you're using only players, so make sure those players are along the lines of the same value when you're trading. Or like I said earlier, if you're trading a top player for some depth pieces and everything, that's pretty much as complicated as trading goes. Bringing it back, we're going to go and move on to CFF Keeper Leagues. Now, this one to me is, I'll be real, the most complicated one, mostly because this isn't a mindset that people typically find themselves in. And also, Keeper Leagues tend to have so many different rules that can affect the value of a draft pick in terms of how it's traded and used. So, to kind of break this down a little bit, if you have a league, sometimes you have a league to where your keepers are the first 3 rounds of next year's draft. So you then have to kind of shift. You have to shift a little bit where it's like, okay, what is a 401 is really the 101. Stuff like that. Like that's one type of league. Again, this is where it gets complicated, because again, it's like very specific. Sometimes in like one of the keepers I have, those the last 3 rounds are your keepers. So the 101 is the 101. You have to know your league. You have to know what's going on with that kind of stuff. In addition, another type of league that we're going to kind of touch on here with our example is you can have a league where sometimes a team is allowed to give up, forfeit their first round pick due to somebody getting an extra keeper. So like say you have the 3 keeper league, but you're allowed to give up your first round pick for a fourth keeper, all of a sudden, like enough people do that, those second round picks, those early second round picks that you had, suddenly start turning into basically first rounders, because all of a sudden you're in the top 12 picks instead of the top 24. Again, these are just things you got to think about, and that's where, again, keepers get a little bit. They get a little bit. I think I've said it 1,000 times. They just get complicated. And so again, I've said it once, I've said it before. Know your league and make sure you are very, very familiar with what the process is. And if you're in a keeper league for the first time, like maybe you took over an orphan or something like that, talk to your commissioner, figure out exactly how things are working going forward. So Brandon, is there anything else you kind of want to really add on the keeper league side of things?
Not a whole lot. Just kind of keep in mind, this is a mashup of both redraft and some dynasty mindset. So this is like a crazy tweener type league, which I love. So just kind of keep in mind, like those people that you are keeping, this is a long-term kind of commitment type situation. Just like in dynasty, are you really ready to give up, a possible first, second, and third, or vice versa? Are you willing to keep 5 keepers and lose your extra first and second round pick? I mean, those are the things that you gotta kind of keep in mind. So when you are trading in those, keep in mind some of those assets you might be able to kind of get rid of in order to keep the keepers the way you want to, but also keep the draft capital you want. So that's kind of like the game play in keeper. So
yeah, I definitely would totally agree. And the other part I want to point out here is that if you're in a keeper league and say you have only 3, like you're only allowed to have 3 keepers, but you're looking at your roster and you're like, God, I have like 7 guys here that are totally all worth keepers. Like maybe you just build a monster team and you're like, all like 7 of these guys are going to be like first, second round picks next year. Use it.
Yeah.
Use it. Well, not even keep them. Trade them. Figure out who your top 3 are. The rest of those guys are trade fodder at that point. Use them. Find a team that is struggling to find some decent keepers. Figure out, like, all right, you aren't doing very well, like, or I think that you're not doing well. Don't, like I said, don't tell them that. But you find a team that's like, okay, maybe they're looking for some keepers. I have some guys that are keeper-worthy players that I'm not going to be able to keep. Let's see if we can make something happen here, and I get some extra early round picks for next year. Because you don't want to be at a point where your keeper league is punishing teams that have built monster teams. You want teams to be able to kind of trade away those big values in order for people to, like, in order to accumulate like more draft picks for that next year's draft and everything. I'm hoping I'm making sense. I'm sorry, y'all. I've been kind of back and forth all day. I feel like I'm losing my train of thought in half of my sentences right now. So please forgive me if that's how I'm coming across today. So did that kind of make sense, Brandon? Like if you if you have players that are kind of on that chopping block, but you really don't, like, you would normally keep them if you just didn't have such good players ahead of them. Make sure you trade them first before you cut them.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Why not shop them around before you decide to keep or cut? So makes sense.
Yep, pretty much that. And let's go ahead and talk about an example here. So this comes from Mr. Nate Marquise, again, contributor at Campus Canton and one of our good buddies. But he kind of gives us an example recently where he had a monster team. Again, just looking at some of his keepers, he had guys like Braylon Allen, Caleb Williams, Tavian Robinson. I think Sean Tucker was in there as well. I can't remember the guys off the top of my head, but again, just monster team. Xavier Worthy, monster team. So he had to trade some of them away. So what are we looking at here? Well, he took 2 guys on his roster, Jordan Addison and Blake Corum, and he traded them to another team who offered him back a 2022 third round pick, 5th pick of the 3rd round, a 2023 8th round pick, and then 10% of their FOB. Now, the caveat here is this is one of those leagues where if you keep a 4th or 5th person, you you forfeit your 1st and 2nd round picks. Thus, that 3rd round pick all of a sudden becomes just a little bit more valuable because people are keeping extra players. So this is more, if Nate described this correctly, it says it's like a mid 3rd round pick, but this is more than likely going to be a mid 2nd round pick. So, Brandon, what do you think of this trade, and which side do you think won this trade at the end of the day?
So I think overall it's smart. Nate told us to roast him, so I'm going to roast him just a little bit. Nate, if you just waited for, maybe spring games, maybe closer into the, as we get the season, you probably would have got more, especially for Addison. Corum, I like that throw-in option for Corum. Corum's like one of those, I wouldn't say he's like top tier, but he's definitely like a tier down, but he's still an effective CFF running back. I mean, you saw what Haskins can do now. Corum has the backfield in Michigan. So, I mean, that's good. But Jordan Addison is a first rounder in CFF Redraft and in Dynasty startups and things like that as well. So I love the 305 because he's going to get his second round. I forget some of the names he had, but his team is it's probably going to be in the championship game. So I can't hate Nate for it. But I think if Nate just waited a little bit longer, he probably could have squeezed out maybe an extra round pick, maybe a higher 2023, maybe even 15% of the fab. I mean, he could have just squeezed out a little bit more of the juice out of the orange. But I can't fault him for this because he needed to keep his first and second round. So now technically a 305 is like him having 2 second round picks, and he's sitting pretty. And now he's got an extra 10% fab that he can go out on the waiver wire and make things happen. Because like we talked about last week, there's always that one person that shows up out of the blue that you need to drop all your waiver wire on because they just blow up and they're the next big thing in CFF as a freshman or maybe a transfer. So I think overall, great job, Nate. Just would have waited a little bit longer. That's it.
Yeah, I have no problem with the 2022 305 pick there.
Not at all.
Like this type of league just isn't designed for people to give away their first and second round picks. Because again, all of a sudden you might get another guy, and then you want to have that first and second round pick in order to have extra keepers. So probably the most valuable thing you can realistically get is that third round. Although if you basically went up to if you go up to somebody and it's like you have them, you're giving them Addison as like their fourth option, and you ask for their first round, like technically all they're doing is giving up that first round regardless. It's just now they have Addison on there as well.
Yep.
But also, like, that kind of begs the question then of, like, oh, what if they just force you to drop them and then they use that first round pick to pick up Addison the next year? Anyway, this is getting too complicated. The big problem I have is you had to have gotten a better option out of 2023 than an 8th round pick. Even in a keeper league, like, that's more equivalent to, like, a 6th round pick that's more equivalent to, like, a 10th, 11th round pick.
Possibly, yeah.
Because again, you got to think about all those keepers taking off those top 3 rounds effectively. So you're basically treating that as like an 11th round pick in a redraft, and you had to have been able to get something better than that, in my opinion, especially for Jordan Addison, a top receiver for next year, a guy that is a borderline like high second round or late first round kind of guy for redraft this year. I feel like you could have gotten something just a little bit better there. And honestly, I would have almost foregone the fab money a little bit in order to get just a little bit higher pick there, maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's our example for keepers. Again, this is by far the most complicated part of it. We're going to go ahead and move on to the part that you guys are probably all waiting on, and then we're going to talk about some Dynasty.
Yes.
So, Brandon, I'm going to let you, I've taken over the first 2. I'm going to let you really kind of drive the discussion on CFF Dynasty Trading. So what do you got, sir?
So we're going to remember, like I said, you can use whatever strategy that you have, but kind of the guide that we kind of gave you last week, kind of just remember those steps and however way that you compartmentalize that to go along with it. Dynasty needs, it's a long term. It's, having these players for multiple years. You're trying to win a championship, because if you're not trying, then why are you just sitting there rebuilding year after year? I get for 1 or 2 years, but the goal is to get better and to make sure that you're in a championship run. You don't want to sit middle of the pack too long, and you don't want to sit at the bottom just collecting, freshman picks for too long either. Get what you got to get and then get to the championship, right? So when it comes to Dynasty, you just got to make sure that it makes sense for you. Like we said, don't tell the other person that they need to do this, this, and this. Like I said, etiquette. But at the same time, like, understand your league mates. And then when you see an opportunity, whether that's someone reaching out to the league saying, I'm looking for this, or you're saying there's a particular guy that I want. So you start out the discussion with, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. can we make this happen? And that's where the talks begin. So we'll go into the example here if you're ready, unless you got anything else you want to add to Dynasty before we move on.
No, again, pretty much with like a lot of these other things, like once we get into the examples, we'll be able to have something that we can really kind of, again, the examples provide us a great way to kind of show people what we mean when we start talking about some of these nuances for these different types of leagues and different types of trading scenarios. So you're right. Let's go ahead and get straight into some of these dynasty trades. First one we got here. On side number 1, they are giving away Marvin Harrison Jr. and a 2022 4th round pick. Side number 2 is giving away Will Shipley and the 2022 5th round pick. So I'm going to go ahead and argue which side of the trade I personally think won this deal. And the person receiving Marvin Harrison Jr. and the 4th round pick, in my opinion, won this trade. I don't want to say hands down, but I definitely would feel a lot more comfortable being on that side of things. And here's why. First and foremost, Marvin Harrison Jr., I think the lead wide receiver at Ohio State at the X position on the outside, which is where Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be, is a more valuable position than the lead back at Clemson, especially if their offense is going to continue to struggle. Now, granted, I think Will Shipley is an incredible talent as a running back, so I think he could bring Clemson's offense back to where it was with Travis Etienne. But even still, like, I just think Marvin Harrison Jr. is just a little bit better of a prospect down the road, in my opinion, just a little bit. But in addition to that, you're also getting a 4th round pick and only giving up a 5th round pick. So if you have a 4th round pick, you're now getting 2 4th round picks, and you're getting a prospect that, in my opinion, is a little bit more valuable than Will Shipley. So I think Marvin Harrison Jr. in the 4th round wins this deal. And Brandon, I know you're kind of twinging a little bit on the inside because I know you're the one who gave up them in this deal. But argue for me. You're the one who received Will Shipley in the 5th round pick. Why do you think you won this trade?
So I actually will agree with you, because to me, it's not about winning a trade. It's about necessity, right? So this is Dynasty. Yeah, it was hard because Harrison was going to be one of my guys. Luckily, I've been lucky to have a few juniors and seniors that I actually have ranked or is ranked higher than Harrison as far as our overall rankings at the CFF team or myself personally. However, it was worth it for me to do that because here's some rebuttals. I was in desperate need of a stronger running back. The guys I have were in tiers that are tier 3 or tier 4, right? Mm-hmm. They're good players. CFF always has great players in those things, but I needed a top dog to really do it. So here's the thing. Clemson's struggling, right? We've heard it from Chris Moxley on the College Unfiltered show where he broke it down a little bit. Will Shipley might be the fantasy asset that you want to have until they figure out this QB situation, whether DJU fixes what he got going on in the brain or Cade Klubnik takes over and he starts dropping bombs on people. But until that, Will Shipley is the trusted one to really get the job done. He's coming back from injury. He looks great. For me, I needed that because, well, we're looking at team needs, right? I needed to have a better tier. And if it meant giving up Harrison, who I think is in the tier 2, I think it was worth to drop that to go with it. And here's the backstory. And this is why counter offers are good. Initially, are my trade partner, and he knows who he is, and he's also talked about on the different podcasts. But he wanted to do a 7th round, so I was like, no. If I'm going to give up a 4th, I want the next one over. So I'm okay with having 2 5th round picks because I trust myself to look at these freshmen or the people that we have on our waiver and be like, I can find great value with another 5th, even though I'm technically losing a 4th round pick. Yes, I have the 3rd pick in each round, so it is a higher one, but he also has the 4th pick in our round. So for me, I'm getting a 504, and now I have 503 and 504. That's pretty solid to me. So did I lose? Yeah, but did I win as far as a team build and actually now looking stronger where I'm now I'm not middle of the pack. I think I finished 5th or 6th. I don't remember. I think Jared might know more than I did, but instead of being in the middle, now I consider myself to kind of be in that top top 5 teams that I can now compete. And my partner that I traded with, he was, I think, either in the championship game or the game before that. But either
He was
way,
in the semifinals.
yeah. So I mean, a great team, and he needed wide receiver help because he lost more wide receivers. I lost more running backs. So it was a perfect trade scenario. He said in our league chat he's looking for particular players, but I was like, hey, I have these many people, and he's like, I want Harrison. I was like, well, let's talk value. And then there's other guys on the table, one of them being Rasheen Ali and Travion Henderson, but I wasn't about to lose more because that trade value would have been much higher.
Oh yeah,
where Shipley was still in a tier like right underneath, I would say, Ali and Henderson, but wasn't worth as saying like didn't cost me as much. So I feel like overall like my team won, but if we're looking at trade wins for sure, my trade partner definitely got the job done for sure.
Yeah, and so like this is fun because the next example we're about to do here, like this example is how we're valuing it now. Like, how do I think you won the trade here and now before the season is even played out? This next one actually comes from a Dynasty League during the season last year. So we were talking about, like, this is an off-season trade. This next one was a near the end of the season trade, like right near the deadline. And so the next one we have here was after week 9 of last year, so the last 4 weeks of the season. One person gave up Sam Howell to a championship level team, and in return got a first round pick that he has since turned into Gervonta Citizen, freshman running back at Miami. First of all, this league is crazy for how early they have done their freshman draft.
I was going to say, like, they've already done their freshman draft.
They've already done
spring games, guys. Spring games. Wait.
They've already done their freshman draft, which some people like that. Some
That's
people
cool.
like that.
Some people just want to do the prospect part. It's just like
it's kind of the same.
Drafts
I would say it's the same thing as like rookie drafts in the NFL. Like some people like having the rookie drafts before the draft because they're just like, oh, you should plant your flag on a guy before you know which team they go to. Which I've never quite understood that because
I'm not on that train.
I'm not on that train. I'm like, no, situation matters so much, and I'm not going to be screwed because I got bad luck in terms of where my favorite prospect got drafted to, because I have no control over that. That's a part of the fantasy I want to have, is control over some of those things. Even so, we're getting off track. Let's get back to this trade. So, Brandon, who won this trade? Giving up Sam Howell after week 9 and getting a first round pick for Gervonta Citizen, or the guy that picked up Sam Howell but then lost in the championship game? So they got second place in the league. Yeah.
So I mean, it sounds like our friend ATL Dan here. He's he gave away Hal, and this is around the time that Hal was banged up. Like literally, Hal and Downs were the only thing really going. At times, Ty Chandler for the Tar Heels, right? So they didn't have that extra back. They didn't have a dominant wide receiver too. Sure. They're working on that, right? But for now, this is where Hal was banged up. He might have missed a game. I think it was either week 10 maybe, or it could have been week 9. So
I think it was week 11 because they were playing Wofford that week, right?
Yeah, it was like a really, it's like an FCS team, right? So, Carolina was supposed to, or at least, projected to win. They did, thank goodness. Hal was, declining. He was running more than his passing. He was still effective. He was really good. But to get out at the end of the season, I think was really smart, because you probably want to get rid of Hal when he was on top of things, especially when he was going up against like Pitt or Wake Forest, where they're like shootout games where you need those points that Sam Howell was producing there at Carolina. So it made sense now that he was declining, and you could tell that he was just ready to end the season, try his best to win what he could, and then get ready for the NFL draft, right? So this is great because now you get a first rounder. I do like Citizen. That's somebody that we're going to talk about in the Future Freshman podcast here coming up probably in a few weeks. I mean, right now we have Knighton as far as the overall running back.
You got Knighton, you got Don Chaney, you got Henry Parrish just came over there from Ole Miss.
That's right, yeah.
And then you got Cody Brown there as well, who's a freshman this past year.
Gotcha. I see Citizen maybe taking it by year 2, possibly, maybe 3. If anything, you have a stash where eventually I think Citizen will wind up being the lead back, whether
Oh
it
yeah.
might be next year or the year after, for sure. But this is where Dynasty comes into play. It's just, can you sit on them for those couple of years? But overall, I like it because of the time frame. If this was early in the season, I would have said no, thank you. I'm trying to win. But he knew where he was like, hey, I'm not going to wind up winning this time. I need to give it to a contender. But this is also week 9. Like, this is where probably a trade deadline needs to take place in your league. Because if it was week 10, I'd be like, that's kind of,
It is getting
it's
a
kind of
little
like you're
close.
helping out. Yeah, you're helping out the championship. But I do like trades in week 8, week 9, when you kind of start seeing a bigger picture and you can start figuring out, all right, I'm not going to win this year. I'm definitely, 5th and under. I'm not going to be in the top 4 or the top 6 or however that you have going in your championship weeks, right? So it's like, if you're not in that space, it's time to get out on some of those players and get you some value. And I think this is a good deal for our buddy ATL Dan. Like I said, the film's great, and I think you got somebody that's going to start, regardless if it's for Miami or he transfers out. You got a starter at least in the next year or so. So kind of, I like it, and I actually do.
Again, my biggest problem with this one is I just personally don't like who he picked with his first round pick. I like Citizen, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's a first rounder this year in freshman drafts. But even still, that's outside of this. If I just saw him trade Sam Howell for a first round pick that next year, totally in. I'm totally in. I made several trades like this last year. I traded last year. So for some more examples here, I don't have graphics for it, but some more examples here. I was second to last in our Dynasty League last year. I had a very, very rough year, but I had Kenny Pickett because I drafted him, and I was just like, he was much better than I ever could expect him to be.
Yeah, he did great.
But I traded him away for a second rounder and Kyle McCord in pretty much the exact same scenario here, where I'm like, all right, just starting to think about the future. So I got Kyle McCord. And then the other one was I traded away Drake London for JoJo Earl and a second round pick.
Which that turned out to be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I felt a little bad because I think it was like the very next week Drake London got...
Yeah, London went down,
Went down. I was just like, well, I feel like then I just got JoJo Earl and a second round pick for free.
Basically. But that's the risk you play. So.
But it's the same mindset as this one, where it's like you're at the end, you trade away some of your guys for some future picks, maybe some younger guys. Totally cool with this. Love this kind of mindset towards the end of the year. I'm personally okay with like teams that are going to the playoff or like very close to the playoff. So like that top 6 team, totally looking at those bottom teams and being like, alrighty, let's see if we can try to trade out some of our picks, go on a run this year, play the risk like that. I'm totally cool with that. That's why I'm okay with later trade deadlines in Dynasty than I am in Redraft.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go ahead and hit up another Dynasty. So we talked about one that is already, two that have already happened. One that is from last year, towards the end of the season. Another one is one that's happening this offseason. This next one hasn't happened yet because it's one of my trades, but I want to discuss it here because I find this one pretty interesting. So, what is happening is that another team is offering myself, Garrett Schrader, and a 2022 6th round pick for Kyle McCord, who's on my team, who I traded for last year, and a 2022 late 2nd round pick. So, Brandon, this is my trade. I have my own thoughts on this, but I want to get your initial reaction to this. What do you think?
So I know, that you have a couple 2nd round picks. So I understand where this might be a little easier for you. What I would recommend is, this is the same trade partner that I have. Maybe see if you could, he's going to hear it, but it is what it is. I think it might be a little bit, maybe try the 5th round to see if it happens. If he's like, no, that's not going to be a deal breaker, back off from it, and then maybe talk some fab or something like that. But you're essentially giving away someone that could possibly start next year, or they're going to transfer and probably start next year. Whereas a guy that can help you win now, because Schrader is an absolute beast when it comes to the run. Isn't it Syracuse that got the Virginia coordinator? So look what happened with Brendan Armstrong last year. Holy cow. If Schrader can do 3/4 of what Brendan Armstrong was able to do, and that man was a gunslinger. That's high. That's high fantasy points. That's one where now you have a dedicated quarterback that you can probably start most weeks until his bye week and stuff like that. And so then you have some depth, right? But McCord is he is considered a stud. That's why he's at Ohio State. So maybe try to get a little bit more value out of it. But honestly, I see it more even. Whereas my trade, like I get it, like I was expecting to lose that trade, but I needed it for my team, right? Like It's about team needs, because that's what we talked about in our dynasty guide. It's just you got to figure out what's best for your team and how you can get from middle of the pack or last up to first, right? And I know where you're coming from a rebuild type situation, so this is a strong player, and you're getting some value at an extra rounder that you can use. And like we said, we have a supplemental and a freshman one, so you could do either or. So that's pretty important for the 6th round pick. Just maybe see if you can squeeze a 5th or maybe some fab at it or something like that. So
you had a very similar mindset to where I was kind of thinking, where like, again, I like having 3 second-round picks. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes.
And I'm almost a little okay with giving up. Like you're saying, move up from 6th to 5th. I would like that.
If it's possible.
If I would like that, but I'd almost also counter with, I'm okay with giving up my 3rd round pick instead of my 2nd round pick here.
Yeah. Because it's like maybe a pick or maybe less between the two, between your late 2nd and your 3rd, right? Because you're 3-1.
And then he's very close to the turn in the 5th, 6th round. So that's not a huge difference there either. But to me, just getting a slight bit more value there, I would think, because again, he's going to get a stud out of Kyle McCord, whether he transfers somewhere else or
if starting somewhere.
Or if he does wait behind CJ Stroud this year, he's the probable starter or the odds-on favorite starter that next year, even if Devin Brown can't beat him out, or if Devin Brown doesn't beat him out. So then he has the starting quarterback for Ohio State. Here's the other thing, though. This is the part that surprised me. So I'm sitting here thinking, like, my team's not in super great shape. Might need to be in rebuild mode for like this year and then try to do it for next year. And I was like, and Garrett Schrader's like, that's like a 1-year deal, right? Because he's been around forever.
Yeah.
How many years of eligibility do you think Garrett Schrader still has?
I think 2. Isn't he going to be a super senior, or he has a graduate option? He has 3. He's 3. A junior.
He has 3. Kyle McCord has 4.
So that's not too big of a difference.
Big.
You think so? Schrader's been around. It's just, I guess he's either redshirted or just has eligibility.
He has an extra year because of COVID and everything. So he's got 3 years.
I forgot about it. Yes, he could be a super senior if he wanted to. Wow. Okay, this makes it a little bit more even than I thought it was going to be. All right,
that was my deal as well. Where I was just like, this is actually a little bit surprising in my opinion. Of like, I was like, I was a little surprised. Where I was like, I'm like, try again, I'm getting a little excited here.
I understand.
I was excited to find that out because I'm like, oh, so this is actually like a piece that I could build around for the next 3 years. Because Garrett Schrader's not going to the NFL. I don't have to worry about that.
No, it's CFF only, yeah.
So I'm thinking I'm probably going to take this deal, and I'm going to probably keep the 6th round, and I'm probably going to offer the 3rd round instead.
I like that.
See if that's a deal breaker for him or not.
Yeah, I think if you come down instead of him going up, that might seal the deal. So we'll see how he reacts. So
yeah. Alrighty. So we talked about that one long enough, but again, I think that was just an interesting trade to talk about. So we're going to talk about one final type of league type here. And again, as I promised, we're going to talk a little bit about campus to Canton leagues and trading in those a little bit. I am by far not the expert to really talk about this, and
neither am I.
I would say no offense to Brandon, neither is he. You got a whole staff that you could talk to about this, but we want to talk about it a little bit just from our perspective about what we think is important in campus to Canton leagues in terms of their trading. Again, obviously you got guys like Austin, Colin, Alfred, Felix, all of those guys over there. They'll give you in-depth breakdowns. I did straight up ask Austin so I can kind of read out to you guys what he finds important in a campus to Canton league trade, and then Brandon and I will kind of break it down from there. We'll talk about whether we agree with this or not. So I asked Austin, I said, what do you consider the most important things in a C2C trade? And his words were, it's so tough because managers can have different objectives and both can nail a trade depending on those goals. 100% agree on that. We've been kind of reiterating that here, where people are going to have different wants and needs in each of their trades, each of their teams. Nobody thinks about fantasy the exact same way. Continuing on. My biggest rule is that I won't trade an NFL stud for college assets unless Bijan or Travion are in there. Too much uncertainty, and typically, unless the college side pays more, which I've never heard of a league doing that, I'd view NFL assets as generally worth slightly more as long as they actually hold value. So Brandon, listening to that, do you agree, disagree? Like, what are you thinking here as like a guy from more of a CFF background?
I mean, it hurts my CFF heart, knowing that the collegiate one, but it makes sense, like, because of the uncertainty, right? Like, no one's guaranteed because they haven't gotten to the NFL draft yet. We're still like what, a month away from, the maybe almost two for the draft. The combine is literally just this week, right? So we don't know, right? So it's like, that makes sense. Like a Henderson, a Bijan, I would maybe even see possibly like a Jameer Gibbs, possibly things like that, where they have the value enough to where you can not almost guarantee it, but as long as nothing crazy happens or God forbid injury, anything weird like that, you got a guy that's probably going to go in at least the first or second rounds, maybe third, but still have value with a team that's in desperate need of a running back that will see playing time, right?
Yeah.
We get it. The NFL is more running back by committee, but there are some teams that their RB1 still gets like 60% of that share versus 40, right, of the RB2. So there's still value to go along with it. We've seen in certain cases in college as well. Take Carolina with Javonte and Michael Carter, right? So I mean, you can see where it's a success sometimes, but this is in general. Like I get it. Like the NFL is they already have an established team. They usually have been with the same team for a few years. You know what they're capable of, and then you also know what they're not capable of. So it's like you have more certainty there. So it makes a lot of sense. Like I said, not being I've played different versions, just not together. So I've never traded like a college person for a NFL person, but at the same time, like I understand being in a NFL dynasty and being in a CFF dynasty, where you got to have similar values. And that's where the C2C makes it fun because, our guys on our staff, they can kind of break it down to you what's level and what's, tier down, tier up, or how many players you got to have to make it more fair. So I agree with Austin.
Yeah, I personally agree with Austin as well, where like they are slightly more valuable than college guys, because if this is a Devy league, like clearly it's built to be more skewed towards the NFL. Like Devy guys are way less valuable. They don't earn you any points. But in a C2C league, they are earning you points on the college side. So you are looking at guys that like, I'd be willing to trade like a lower NFL guy for a higher college guy for the most part. Like I would be willing to do that. Now again, he adds the part in here where it's like, as long as the NFL assets actually hold value, which, yeah, that makes sense. Like, clearly, like, Bijan Robinson is not going to be worth less than, like, I don't know, like, Frank Gore. Like, nobody can seriously look at you and be like, oh, he's already in the NFL, though. Like, he's clearly worth more. Like,
same thing. Like, you might covet Treylon Burks a little bit more than you would say Julio Jones at this point because of the declining years, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah, like NFL doesn't. It's not a end all be all. But again, if the person actually has dynasty value, then they're probably going to have more weight than anybody you could get on the college side. Again, with some exceptions, like again Bijan, Travion, I'd say Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are probably getting up there in my opinion.
Yep, Caleb Williams is on the fast track that way as well.
I don't know why I completely forgot about Caleb.
It's all good.
Anyway. I'm gonna turn on my light real quick because it's getting real dark outside, so I just need a little light on me. Anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about a trade example here, and we're just gonna go. This is a very simple trade, nothing crazy about this one. Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, straight up. Which side are you taking, Brandon?
Well, me and Jared have a discussion before we started the pod, and it was a good discussion because we're talking about age. We're talking about how Saquon is. Look at between Gibbs and Saquon. If you're looking at just the college level, holy cow, Saquon Barkley was elite. He was the cream of the crop. Like when we talk about Nicholas Singleton, I talk to him almost in the same breath as I talk about Saquon Barkley. Not saying that he's a Barkley, copy or anything like that. He's just a special talent. Saquon is special. The man knows how to run with ferocity and vengeance, and he just knows how to. He's got that wiggle. He knows how to get downfield and get to the second level. He knows how to score touchdowns. Now, recently, he's had a bit of the injury bug, so that kind of dampens because there's some uncertainty there. So that's where this trade becomes a little bit more. Saquon is 25, and me and Jared were talking like most running backs in the NFL, usually after the age of 26 or 27, you kind of want to start looking at a trade type situation because they're still going to produce. But when they get to near that age 30, that's where you see a big drop off as far as production. Now we have Jahmyr Gibbs, was at Georgia Tech. Now he's at Alabama, and he is the projected running back one. They're going to tie in probably Sanders and a few other ones there as well to relieve him. But Gibbs is going to be the guy. That's why he transferred there. Obviously, Saban offered him and Burton probably significant playing time and at least the chance to start, right? So, and being an Alabama running back, let's look at the lineage there, like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, even B-Rob that's coming out of the draft now. He might be like 4th or 5th round, right, in an actual NFL draft, but I bet he'll be a great backup. And if someone goes down to injury, best believe Robson knows how to get the job done because Nick Saban taught him that well. So here's Gibbs. So now we're talking, someone in their prime. I do agree with Jared. If Saquon got out of New York and went to like a team that was in desperate need of running back, holy cow, Saquon Barkley would destroy. But we've seen Saquon in New York at 100%, and we know what he's capable of as far as a weekly basis. So do we see that Saquon? If that's the case, I probably would still say Saquon. But if we start seeing, but it is hard to not pass up not wanting Jahmyr Gibbs because now you have at least 1 year of college left, maybe even 2 if he wants to stay. And then now you have a team that's probably going to look at Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, he's that burner running back that we need. And of course, now he has the lineage there at Alabama. So that makes him a little bit more valuable than what he would have been at Georgia Tech. So it's probably a lot more even than what we think. I'm not the C2C specialist. So maybe Jared might put a poll or something like that up or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. We'll see. But for me personally, I lean Saquon, but it is really hard to say no to Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, after this episode releases for you guys, I'm probably going to put up like Twitter polls and everything for some of these. I'm not going to put the one up with Nate where it's like, oh, by the way, they also have 10% fab and the keeper. Like there were so many pieces to that one. I was just like, I'm not going to be able to type that in 25 characters or less. Absolutely not. But this one I could easily kind of put up there and be like, hey, C2C question. Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon Barkley. I'll definitely tag the person who asked. By the way, that was Beat Douglas. Beat Douglas, shout out to you, man. He's the one who asked this question. I thought it was a pretty good one. But again, this to me kind of exemplifies the C2C mindset where you normally would just kind of lean NFL guy, like, oh, Saquon Barkley's already in the NFL, probably going to lean towards him and everything because we don't know Jahmyr Gibbs is actually going to be that round 2, round 3 running back that a lot of us are expecting him to be because maybe he falls off. Maybe at Alabama he just doesn't fit. Regardless of that, but there's argument that Barkley doesn't hold as much dynasty value as he used to, and thus he's kind of approaching that realm where people might start considering the college side guy just over him, especially if you really are on the Jahmyr Gibbs bandwagon. Yeah. So, again, to me, it's an interesting question. I personally side Barkley here because I do think that if he gets out of New York and he gets on that second contract with somebody else, and hopefully he doesn't he stays healthy for the love of God.
Please.
I
need him for Dynasty. Thank you.
I think he's going to be awesome somewhere. God, if the Falcons can somehow get him.
Oh my gosh, yes. Don't tempt me with that.
I'm tempting you with that one because I want that. I'm a Falcons man. Anyway.
That's true.
So that pretty much covers everything. Again, try to keep this organized as much as possible. We hit a lot of different areas tonight, y'all. And if you want more thoughts on this and everything, you can always find me on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. You can talk to Brandon. He is at CFF University. And yeah, like I said, we're pretty much done with the show here, y'all. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, leave comments down below, all of that good jazz. If you're listening on podcast, make sure you follow. Make sure you leave any of those reviews if you are able to do so. I already mentioned my Twitter. So Brandon, why don't you go ahead before we get out of here, kind of plug everything that you're kind of working on and let the people know where they can find you.
Yep. So just like I was telling you earlier, keep a lookout for the video format of the Future Freshman podcast that's going to release on the Campus to Canton channel. We are going to be recording the next episode here pretty soon, so you'll have that by Friday, so be prepared. I got my friend Matthew Bruning, who's one of the co-founders there of C2C, so he'll be able to give you a little bit of aspect of that while we talk about CFF and a couple of these freshmen that are coming in. So I'm super excited. The Big Fish, Small Pond, I'm kind of excited about this one, and this one's not as well-known name, so this should be a good discussion.
You won't even tell me which one this is.
Not yet, because eventually this is another one you're going to need to put a gold star next to and be like, all right, just keep in mind because of the trend of what we're seeing in college. So that if that makes sense, you might be able to start putting some pieces together, right?
True.
So just be looking out for that. Like I said, if you can leave a review, 5 stars on both Apple and Spotify. I'd highly appreciate it. And also do the same for Chase and Natty, because this is a wonderful podcast. And there's a reason why I keep coming back, and that's because Jared does a fantastic job, and I love being on there. So thanks for having me again, Jared, and looking forward to seeing you guys, whether it be on Twitter or, on YouTube or any other places you might hear me on platforms for podcasting. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Brandon, thank you so much again for coming on, and appreciate you doing this 2 weeks in a row, talking Dynasty, whether it be
Absolutely.
Just getting everybody ready, now talking trades and everything. I'm thinking we're probably not going to do a freshman draft in the next couple of weeks, but I do think that after spring, because we're about to shift towards spring practices and eventually spring games and such, but when we have kind of a slow week regarding that and everything, I totally wouldn't mind bringing you on, bringing Nate, Chris Moxley on here. Let's do a freshman draft and just kind of run through one. Just
that'd be fun.
A couple of us. I think that would be a fun one to do. Even so, again, appreciate all of y'all tuning in. And yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up for you guys, so keep an eye out for that. With all that being said, y'all have a blessed day.